Usually when you set out to build a house, you start with a blueprint, right? You dig into the dirt, you pour a concrete foundation, frame out the walls, and put in these heavy, solid doors.
Right, yeah, you got that structure.
Exactly. There's this immense, biological comfort in that structure. You stand in the middle of the living room and you think, I have built a sanctuary. The elements are out there, and I am safe in here.
It's just that basic human drive for security. I mean, we all have it. You define the boundaries, and the chaos of the world just stays on the other side of the glass.
Yeah, but imagine you live in that house for years, feeling perfectly secure. Then, one cold morning, you walk up to your beautiful, solid front door, you reach for the deadbolt, and you realize something totally terrifying.
The locks are on the outside.
Yes, the locks are on the outside. You haven't built a sanctuary at all, you built a prison. And worse, you realize you handed the keys to someone else a long, long time ago.
Wow. Yeah, that architectural illusion is, it's the exact psychological trap that a community of 5,000 people fell into in the high desert of Oregon back in 1985.
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. Today, for our deep dive, we are looking at a series of transcripts titled From Bondage to Freedom. And I should point out, these aren't polished academic essays written in some quiet library.
Oh, not at all.
Right. These are real-time, raw discourses. They were delivered by a spiritual teacher who's referred to in the text simply as the master to a commune known as the Big Muddy Ranch.
And this text really captures a community standing right in the wreckage of their own utopian sanctuary, right?
Exactly. And to really understand the gravity of these transcripts, you have to picture the physical reality of this place for a second.
Yeah.
We are talking about 64,000 acres of harsh, barren, rocky terrain.
Middle of nowhere.
Totally. And they took this absolute wasteland, and through sheer backbreaking labor, they built a fully functioning city. I mean, they had their own dams, their own agriculture, an airport, even a bus system.
It's like an audacious experiment in just pure human freedom.
It was. But the text we are examining today, it doesn't start with the glory of that achievement. It starts in the immediate aftermath of a deeply disturbing internal scandal.
Right.
The community's pursuit of spiritual liberation had violently collided with, the cold, hard mechanics of authoritarian control.
So our mission today is to narrate the core philosophies of this book in the grit and detail they really demand. We're going to look at the psychological trap of wanting to be extraordinary, which the author identifies as the actual root of human suffering.
Yeah, that part is fascinating.
It really is. And we're going to examine the physiological mechanics of work and attention, break down exactly how organized religion and political power hijack the human mind, and finally look at the immense, often terrifying cost of absolute, unmediated freedom.
But a quick note for you listening before we get our hands dirty with this material.
Yeah, good call.
The text pulls absolutely zero punches. I mean, it contains highly charged, deeply controversial critiques of Christianity, Judaism, the American government, and basically all global political ideologies.
Oh yeah, no one is safe in this book.
Right. So our role here is not to take a side, endorse the claims, or, offer some kind of moral judgment. We're just going to impartially map out the author's arguments exactly as they were laid out in the mud and dust of 1985, so you can see the machinery of these ideas for yourself.
Exactly. So let's start by stripping the human ego down to the studs, because before the author even addresses the crisis that nearly destroyed his city, he attacks the foundational disease of the modern mind.
The desperate, exhausting desire to be special.
Yes. The text argues that mediocrity is the baseline state of humanity, but it is a self-inflicted mediocrity. Like, society actively maintains this stunted state by constantly injecting a specific poison into our psyche.
And that poison is the belief that you are, or you must become, extraordinary.
Right. And that just hits you right in the chest, because everything in our culture, from the way we raise our kids to, corporate ladder climbing, it's all built on the premise that being average is a total failure.
Yeah, we're terrified of being average.
We really are. And the author uses a brutal metaphor here. He compares the average person to a bonsai tree.
Oh, man. The bonsai metaphor is rough.
It is. You take a tree that has the genetic potential to grow 100 feet tall, but you put it in this tiny artificial pot. You continuously cut its taproot, you wire its branches, you basically starve it of its natural expansion.
Right, you mutilate it.
Exactly. And to keep the tree from realizing it has been mutilated into this decorative vegetable, you put it on a pedestal and call it a masterpiece. You call it special.
And to explain the mechanics of how this control actually works on a human level, the text leans on a story told by the mystic George Gurdjieff.
I love this story.
It's so good. So it's about a shepherd who also happened to be a magician. Now, this shepherd had a massive flock of sheep and a very practical economic problem.
Sheep one.
Exactly. Sheep are timid, but they wander. They wander into the forest, they fall off cliffs, they get eaten by wolves, and the shepherd didn't want to spend his whole life chasing them, and he definitely didn't want to spend a fortune building thousands of miles of heavy fencing.
So what does he do?
He utilizes psychological warfare. He systematically hypnotized every single sheep in his flock. He went to one and whispered, "You are not a sheep, you are a lion." To another, "You are a tiger." To another, "You are a man."
And the behavioral shift is just instant.
Complete transformation. The sheep who believed he was a lion started carrying himself with arrogance. He looked at the other sheep with total disdain.
Wow.
Yeah. He didn't wander off into the woods because lions don't need to scavenge with the herd. And most importantly, when the shepherd came to slaughter a sheep for dinner, the lion sheep didn't panic.
Well, that's dark.
Right. He just stood there thinking, "He's killing a sheep. I am a lion. This doesn't concern me." The shepherd achieved total, absolute control without building a single physical fence.
The sheep were literally imprisoned by their own inflated self-image.
Exactly. And the psychological parallel here is staggering. The desire to be extraordinary isn't a rebellion against the system. It is the very leash the system uses to control you.
Because if you are obsessed with proving you are a lion, you are completely distracted from the fact that you are standing in a slaughterhouse.
Precisely. But the text makes a very sharp distinction that we need to clarify here. The author isn't saying everyone is just a gray monolithic clone. He draws a hard line between being special and being unique.
Right, because nature only produces unique things, but it never produces special things.
Yeah, the concept of special requires a hierarchy, a comparison. The text points to a massive, towering pine tree standing right next to a small, wild rose bush.
Okay.
Now, if you apply human psychology to that forest, it's a tragedy. The rose bush looks up at the pine and feels this agonizing inferiority complex. It thinks, "I am a failure, I am small, my wood is weak, I'm nobody."
And the pine tree is probably looking down with extreme arrogance, thinking, "I am the king of the forest."
Exactly. But in reality, the forest operates in total silence and absolute equality. The pine tree has never boasted about its height, and the rose bush has never felt a shred of inferiority because they are not running in the same race.
Right. The pine tree can never produce a single rose.
And the rose bush will never touch the clouds. They simply exist in their own unique authenticity.
To bring this into the human arena, the text brings up one of the most famous encounters in ancient history, which is Alexander the Great meeting the philosopher Diogenes.
Oh, this is the ultimate clash of egos.
It really is. Alexander is the ultimate embodiment of the extraordinary ego. I mean, he's marching with a massive army, conquering the known world, leaving literal rivers of blood in his wake just to attach the words "the Great" to his name.
Yeah.
And he hears about Diogenes, this man who threw away his last possession, which was just a wooden bowl, when he saw a dog drinking from a puddle. Diogenes lives naked in a barrel on the banks of a river. He is the ultimate ordinary man.
So Alexander rides down to the riverbank. He's standing there in his armor, the most powerful man on earth, looking at a naked man lying in the sun. And Alexander, trying to be, magnanimous, asks if there's anything he can do for him.
And Diogenes' response is just legendary.
It is. Diogenes looks at him and says, "Yes, stand a little to the side. You are blocking the sun."
That is a devastating blow to Alexander's ego.
Huge. He realizes his power means absolutely nothing to a man who wants nothing. Alexander actually admits that if he were not Alexander, he would want to be Diogenes.
And Diogenes laughs and points out the trap. He asks Alexander, "Where are you going?" Alexander says, "I'm going to conquer India." Diogenes asks, "And then what?"
"Then I will conquer the rest of the world.
And then?
Then I will finally rest."
And Diogenes hits him with the fatal logic of the ego. He says, "I am resting right now. If the ultimate goal of all this conquest and bloodshed is to rest on a riverbank, why don't you just lie down next to me?"
Right. You don't need to conquer the world to relax. You are wasting your life on an ego trip that will only end when it kills you.
Which, author notes the brutal historical irony there. Alexander ignored the warning. He pushed his army to the brink of mutiny, contracted a fever, and died at the age of 33.
But that encounter with the naked philosopher haunted him to his deathbed. I mean, Alexander gave his generals a bizarre final order.
The thing with his hands, right?
Yes. He demanded that when they carried his casket through the streets, his hands must be left dangling outside, empty for everyone to see. He wanted the world to witness that the man who spent his life desperately trying to be extraordinary, the man who basically owned the earth, was leaving it exactly as he arrived, completely empty-handed.
See, I have to challenge this premise, though.
Okay, lay it on me.
It's a compelling historical anecdote, sure. But if I'm listening to this while commuting to a job where I'm trying to get a promotion to feed my family, this philosophy sounds dangerously close to giving up. Like, if we drop all ambition to be extraordinary, don't we lose the friction that drives human progress? Doesn't the anxiety to be great give us, Renaissance art, modern medicine, the space program?
It's a fair question, and the text actually anticipates that exact defense. The author argues that you are confusing the byproduct with the source.
How so?
He says the anxiety to be extraordinary does not produce genius. It produces hypocrisy and mediocrity. Look at the mechanics of ambition. When you are desperately trying to prove you are special, your entire psychological focus is external.
You're constantly measuring yourself against the guy next to you.
Exactly. You start wearing masks, you hide your failures, you calculate your moves, and you live in a state of perpetual vibrating tension. You cannot be genuinely creative in that state. You are just a competitor in a rat race.
So the ambition actually suffocates the creativity because you're too worried about the scoreboard to actually play the game.
Exactly that. The text states that true, earth-shattering creativity only emerges from a deeply relaxed, entirely natural state. When you finally exhale and accept, I am just an ordinary human being, I have nothing to prove, the psychological chains snap.
Wow.
Yeah, a massive amount of mental energy that was being wasted on ego maintenance is suddenly freed up. You actually have the bandwidth to observe the world. The painter doesn't paint to become famous. He paints because the act of mixing the colors and striking the canvas is an absolute present moment joy.
Dropping the race doesn't make you lazy. It makes you authentic.
Exactly.
Okay, but if we accept this, if we drop the armor and agree to just be ordinary, how does this text suggest we actually function on a Tuesday morning? Like, how do we work? Because there's a difference between lying in a barrel in the sun and keeping a society running.
Well, the author provides a very granular, mechanical breakdown of how human attention operates in the physical world. He divides the mind's function into 3 distinct categories: concentration, spacing out, and witnessing.
Okay.
And he argues that most of humanity is violently oscillating between the first 2 and completely missing the third, which he equates to true meditation.
Let's start with concentration, because in the West, we elevate concentration to a superpower.
We really do. And the text uses an ancient story from the Mahabharata about the master archer Dronacharya to illustrate this. He is training a group of royal disciples. He places a small wooden bird in a tree and asks the first prince to draw his bow and tell him what he sees.
Right.
The prince says, I see the tree, I see the sky, I see the bird. Dronacharya tells him to step down. He cannot shoot. He asks the next prince, I see the branch and the bird. Step down.
Tough crowd.
Yeah. Finally, he asks his greatest student, Arjuna. Arjuna draws his bow and says, I see absolutely nothing except the right eye of the bird. And the master says, shoot.
That is the pinnacle of concentration. It is the narrowing of consciousness down to a single microscopic point. It is linear, sharp, and aggressive.
And the author is very pragmatic here. He acknowledges that concentration is a highly effective biological tool. If you are a surgeon operating on a heart or a scientist looking through a microscope, you must use concentration.
Right.
But the text warns that concentration is not a spiritual state. It is an act of exclusion. To see only the bird's eye, Arjuna had to mentally annihilate the tree, the sky, the wind, and himself. It creates immense tension. You cannot live in a state of concentration without burning out your nervous system.
Which brings us to the natural pendulum swing reaction. If you can't maintain that extreme tension, the mind defaults to the absolute opposite, which is spacing out.
Right. Spacing out is the fragmentation of consciousness. The text describes this as a state of psychological scattering, where the physical body is occupying one dimension of space and time, but the mind has shattered into a dozen different fragments, operating in entirely different realities.
And the examples the text uses for this are almost uncomfortably relatable. Like, the author talks about observing a woman who had turned this into an art form.
Oh, the porch story.
Yeah. She is sitting on a porch. She is rocking a baby's cradle with her foot. She is knitting a complex sweater with both hands. And she has a newspaper propped up that she is reading with her eyes.
Multitasking at its finest.
Exactly. From the outside, it looks like supreme efficiency. But the author points out the terrifying internal reality. If her body is performing 3 complex tasks simultaneously in the physical world, her mind is likely a chaotic storm of 100 different thoughts.
She's thinking about what to cook for dinner, replaying an argument she had yesterday, and worrying about a bill due tomorrow.
Right. And the author gives an even more intimate, cutting example. He says to imagine two people making love in a dark room.
This one is brutal.
It is. The physical bodies are engaged in the most intimate act possible. But the man's mind is completely detached from the room. He is projecting a fantasy and making love to a mental image of Marilyn Monroe.
And the woman is projecting her own fantasy, imagining she is with Muhammad Ali.
And the author bluntly states, whenever two persons are making love, there is at least a crowd.
Wow.
The bodies are merely going through mechanical friction, but the humans are miles away. This is the tragedy of spacing out. You are never actually where your feet are. You are a ghost haunting your own life.
So concentration is too tight, and spacing out is too loose. The solution the text proposes is the third state, witnessing.
Tell me about witnessing.
Well, the text brings in the story of the Zen master Nanyan. The emperor of Japan, seeking profound esoteric wisdom, travels to Nanyan's remote monastery. He expects to find the master levitating or reciting ancient, complex sutras.
Naturally.
Instead, he finds Nanyan out in the yard holding an axe, chopping firewood. The emperor is highly offended. He asks Nanyan what his great spiritual teaching is. Nanyan stops, leans on his axe, and says, "When I chop wood, I simply chop wood. And when I carry water from the well, I simply carry water."
And the emperor thinks he's being mocked. He says, everyone chops wood and carry the water.
But Nanyan corrects him. He explains the agonizingly difficult mechanics of witnessing. When the emperor chops wood, he is thinking about the kingdom, about his enemies, about tomorrow's weather. He is spacing out.
Right.
When Nanyan chops wood, the mind is entirely empty. There is no past, no future. There is only the way of the axe, the sound of the steel hitting the grain, the smell of the pine, the exact contraction of the muscle. He is totally, fiercely present in all dimensions.
The author distills this into a single profound rule. Changing work into worship is the secret.
That's a great line.
It really is. Work is what you do when you are spaced out or concentrated. Worship has nothing to do with being in a church. Worship is the act of bringing your total undivided consciousness into a mundane action.
Yes.
If you are totally present, sweeping a dirty floor becomes a divine spiritual act. If your mind is wandering, kneeling at an altar is just dead, mechanical labor.
And to really hammer home the point that the reward for this presence is immediate, not delayed, the author tells a brilliant joke about a Munich station porter.
Oh, I love this joke.
So this porter is a tough, gritty guy whose entire world revolves around carrying heavy luggage all day and drinking dark beer with his friends at the local pub all night. It's an ordinary, repetitive life, but he's deeply rooted in it. One night, the angels of death make an administrative error and accidentally pull his soul out of his body. Oops. Yeah. And he wakes up and he's in heaven. They sit him on a fluffy white cloud, hand him a golden harp, and an angel tells him, "Congratulations, you have made it to eternal paradise. Your job now is to pluck this harp and sing Alleluia for the rest of eternity."
Sounds like hell for this guy.
Completely. The porter looks around the sterile, brightly lit clouds. He asks, "Where's the pub? Where's the beer?" The angels are scandalized. They tell him there is no alcohol in heaven, only eternal purity and harp music.
All right, what does he do?
He tries to play along for a few days, but the absolute lack of grit, the lack of earthly joy, it just drives him insane. He starts plucking the harp aggressively. In between singing Alleluia, he starts screaming profanities at the angels and the other saints.
Just totally losing it.
Yeah. He causes such a massive disruption in paradise that God himself reviews the ledger, realizes the mistake, and immediately deports him back to Earth.
And the guy wakes up in Munich, walks straight out of his house, goes to his local pub, orders a massive beer, takes a sip, and realizes he is already in paradise.
Exactly. And the philosophical weight of that joke is immense. The author is destroying the concept of delayed spiritual gratification. Heaven is not a geographical location you get to after you die as a reward for being miserable and obedient on Earth.
Right.
If you don't know how to be fiercely present and extract joy from a cold beer, a difficult job, or a conversation with a friend today, throwing you on a cloud with a harp isn't going to fix your psychology. You will just carry your misery into eternity.
Okay, so this philosophy of chopping wood, being present, and dropping the ego is beautiful in the abstract. It's easy to be a Zen master when you live alone in the mountains. But this text wasn't delivered in a vacuum. The ultimate stress test for this philosophy is what happens when you take 5,000 people trying to live this way, put them in a high desert commune, and add millions of dollars, physical isolation, and a power vacuum. We have to look at the historical reality of the Big Muddy Ranch.
Yeah, the transition from the ethereal philosophy to the brutal reality of the commune is jarring, but it is the crucible in which these teachings were forged.
Right.
So the master had taken a vow of public silence. For over 3.5 years, he did not speak to the commune directly. He remained in absolute isolation in his quarters. The only bridge between the master and the 5,000 people running the city was his personal secretary, a woman named Sheila.
And nature abhors a vacuum. When a leader steps back, someone steps up. The transcripts document a systemic, chillingly methodical takeover.
They really do.
Sheila and a very tight, fiercely loyal inner circle, her gang, as the author calls them, they basically weaponize the commune's trust.
The level of surveillance and paranoia they established rivals a Cold War thriller. The author details how Sheila's team secretly wired his private quarters. They actually hollowed out the emergency medical buzzer next to his bed and implanted a highly sensitive microphone so they could monitor every single word spoken in his room.
That is insane. The medical buzzer.
I know. They tapped the phones of commune members. They read the mail. It was the rapid construction of a surveillance state disguised as a spiritual utopia.
And it escalated from surveillance to biological violence. The text explicitly outlines how Sheila's faction systematically poisoned people who posed a threat to their control.
Yeah, the details are horrifying.
The master's personal physician, Dave Raj, was injected with an unknown toxin right in the middle of a massive public festival. They slowly, methodically poisoned the master's caretaker, Vivek, over a period of weeks to eliminate her influence.
And you have to understand the psychological tactics Sheila used to consolidate this power. The author points out that she actively drove away anyone with high intelligence, anyone with an independent streak, or anyone who asked critical questions.
Just getting rid of the threats.
Right. She systematically purged the community of critical thinkers and replaced them with mediocre, highly compliant individuals who were just happy to be given a uniform and an order. It was a textbook fascist restructuring.
Wow.
And when the master finally recognized the severity of the rot, broke his silence, and began publicly dismantling her power structure, she panicked. The text notes that she and her inner circle fled the country overnight, absconding with massive commune funds.
Like millions of dollars.
Yeah, a $43 million account is specifically cited in the transcripts.
See, when you hear a story like that, the immediate cultural reflex is to quote Lord Acton. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right, everyone says that.
You take a secretary, you hand her the keys to a $50 million city, and the power turns her into a monster. It's a comforting thought because it blames the abstract concept of power.
It is comforting, but the text vehemently rejects it. The author completely dismantles Lord Acton's theory. He argues that power has zero inherent moral weight. Power does not corrupt.
Oh.
No. Power is nothing but a high-definition mirror and a massive amplifier. It does not put a single drop of malice into you that wasn't already circulating in your bloodstream.
He says it brings the hidden dictator to the surface.
Precisely. The text uses a terrifying phrase, the Genghis Khan within.
I remember that line.
It's so visceral. The author explains the psychology of the powerless. When you are a poor, average citizen with no authority, you have to smile. You have to be polite to your boss. You have to follow the laws. Not because you are inherently good, but because you lack the leverage to act out your darkest desires.
You are forced into a state of behavioral compliance.
Exactly. But the moment you are handed the crown, the moment you are handed millions of dollars and thousands of obedient followers, the artificial constraints evaporate. You no longer have to pretend. Power didn't corrupt Sheila. Power simply provided the raw materials and the safety for her to show her authentic face.
But the author does not let the commune off the hook by just blaming Sheila. And this is where the text becomes incredibly uncomfortable for the listener.
Oh yeah, he turns the mirror on them.
He does. He looks out at an audience of 5,000 highly educated people, doctors, lawyers, engineers who left their lives to build the city, and he asks the most devastating question. How did you let her do this to you?
He shifts the spotlight from the oppressor to the oppressed. He diagnoses a deeply ingrained, almost genetic flaw in the human psyche, the desperate craving for a father figure.
Why do we want that so badly?
Because freedom is a heavy, terrifying burden. If you are truly free and your life falls apart, you have no one to blame but yourself. That level of absolute responsibility causes massive psychological anxiety. So, what do humans do? They look for someone to hand the keys to. They want a politician, a priest, or a dictator to tell them what to eat, when to sleep, and what to think.
It's basically the Milgram experiment playing out on a municipal scale.
Exactly. When the master went into silent isolation, the commune was faced with the terrifying prospect of governing themselves. Instead of stepping up, they reflexively fell to their knees. They willingly, enthusiastically handed their agency to Sheila because it was easier to be her slaves than to be their own masters.
That is profound.
The author tells them bluntly that freedom and license are not the same thing. License is doing whatever you want without consequence. True freedom requires immense, grueling self-responsibility. If you do not actively defend your freedom through daily awareness and communal responsibility, nature will instantly fill the vacuum with another dictator.
And the author traces this reflexive submission back to a much older, much darker source. He argues that the commune was so easily subjugated because humanity has been undergoing a global psychological conditioning program for thousands of years.
Here we go.
Yeah, this brings us to the most controversial, explosive section of the transcripts. The author's complete annihilation of organized religion and the concept of God.
The author links the microfascism of the commune directly to the macrofascism of global theology. He declares unequivocally that God does not exist and that the concept of a supreme creator is the most dangerous psychological weapon ever invented by the priesthood to keep humanity in a state of perpetual infantile dependency.
He leans heavily into the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche here. Nietzsche is famous for writing God is dead. But the author highlights the critical second half of that equation, the part most people leave out.
God is dead and therefore man is free.
Exactly. We have to unpack the mechanical logic of this theological argument because it is airtight in its parameters.
It really is. The text asks you to look at the definition of the traditional monotheistic God, an omniscient, all-powerful creator who exists outside of time and knows the past, present, and future perfectly. If such an entity exists, the author argues, then the future is entirely predetermined. It is a locked script. God already knows what you will do tomorrow.
Now, if I'm a theologian listening to this, I'm screaming, what about free will? God gave us free will. Apologists have spent centuries building complex frameworks, arguing that God can see the future, but you still make the choices.
And the author just shreds that compatibilist defense. He argues it is a logical impossibility.
Walk me through that.
If God perfectly sees that you will choose A tomorrow, you do not have the power to choose B. If you chose B, God's vision would be wrong, which would destroy his omniscience.
Wow, okay.
Therefore, your sense of making a choice is a complete neurological illusion. You are nothing but a biological puppet acting out a script that was finalized before the stars were born. The text asserts that true freedom can only exist in an open, unwritten, terrifyingly unpredictable universe. For the human spirit to possess genuine agency, the dictatorial concept of an omniscient creator must be discarded.
To really drive this home, the text does a complete, radical inversion of the foundational myth of Western civilization, the Garden of Eden.
This part blew my mind.
Right. In the standard Sunday school version, God creates a paradise, puts Adam and Eve in it, and gives them one rule. Don't eat from the tree of knowledge. They disobey, they commit the original sin, and humanity is cursed with suffering, labor, and death. It is a story designed to instill absolute terror of disobedience.
But the author asks you to read the story from the perspective of an investigative journalist. Look at the actual mechanics of what is happening. God puts two human beings in a garden, naked, completely ignorant, and denies them the two things that would make them his equal: knowledge and eternal life.
Right.
The text argues that God, in this story, is acting exactly like a totalitarian dictator. He is keeping his subjects as uneducated, dependent livestock.
And then the serpent enters.
Yes. The serpent, who the church brands as Satan, approaches Eve and tells her the truth. The serpent says, if you eat this fruit, you will not die. Your eyes will be opened, and you will be like gods.
So he flips the villain into the hero.
Totally. The text elevates the serpent from a villain to the first great revolutionary hero in the history of consciousness. The serpent represents doubt. It represents the scientific method, the spark of inquiry.
The author even points out the linguistic irony that the word devil shares an ancient Sanskrit root with the word divine, right?
Exactly. Without the serpent's intervention, Adam and Eve would still be chewing grass in the garden like cattle. Every advancement in human history, art, science, philosophy, medicine, is the direct result of humanity's willingness to disobey authority and seek knowledge.
The ultimate target of this critique isn't just the abstract concept of God, though. It is the physical institution built around it. The text identifies the priest as the ultimate parasite.
The lawyer analogy.
Yes, the author compares the priest to a lawyer in a broken justice system. If you want justice, you can't just talk to the judge. You have to hire a lawyer to translate the complex, arcane laws. The lawyer inserts himself as an artificial middleman and extracts a fee.
And the priest does the exact same thing, but on a cosmic scale. The priest convinces you that you are fundamentally broken, that you are born with original sin, that you are impure. He invents the disease of guilt.
And once you are sufficiently terrified of hell,
He conveniently offers to sell you the cure. He sets himself up as the only authorized mediator between you and the universe.
but the author asks a deeply grounded question. Why do you need a mediator to speak to the air you breathe? You are a biological extension of the universe. The priest's authority relies entirely on maintaining your ignorance and your fear.
This leads the author to define the difference between a revolution and a rebellion. And this distinction is crucial for understanding how the commune is supposed to move forward after Sheila.
Right, because history is full of revolutions.
Yeah.
The French Revolution, the Russian Revolution. You organize a massive, violent group, you overthrow the ruling class, you chop off the king's head.
But the text argues that violent revolutions are mathematically doomed to fail.
Why is that?
Because to overthrow a ruthless dictator using violence, the revolutionaries must become more ruthless, more organized, and more violent than the dictator they are fighting.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, by the time they win, they have internalized the exact same fascist psychology. They simply drag the guillotine to the center of town, put on different uniforms, and become the new oppressors. The wheel just turns.
And rebellion, on the other hand, is an entirely different mechanism. The author states that a true rebellion is never violent, and it is never organized. It is deeply, intensely individual.
Right.
A rebel doesn't waste energy trying to burn down the Capitol building. A rebel meditates to transform his own consciousness. A revolutionary tries to change the external structure of the past.
Yeah.
A rebel changes the internal psychology of the future.
Okay, but I have to play the ultimate skeptic here.
Go for it.
This master is sitting on a podium in front of 5,000 people who wear clothes in shades of red, who wear beaded necklaces with his picture on them, who meditate when he tells them to. If he is telling them to drop their religions, drop their father figures, and reject the priests, isn't he literally just acting as the new priest?
It's the ultimate question.
Right. Isn't he just tearing down the old churches so he can build a new one with his name on the marquee?
It is the defining paradox of any spiritual movement, and it is the exact trap the author addresses head-on in these transcripts. He recognizes that his followers have begun to deify him. They're trying to turn him into a savior.
So what does he do?
To stop the formation of a new religion, he executes a brutal, systematic demolition of his own movement from the inside out.
The transcripts show him doing this in real time, right? It's wild.
It is wild. He orders the commune to gather copies of a book titled Rajneeshism, a book that attempted to codify his teachings into a structured religion, and he has them publicly burned. He tells his followers all isms are dead. To bind truth in an ism is to kill it. He instructs them to immediately stop wearing the mandatory red clothing. He tells them to take off the mullahs, the beaded necklaces bearing his photograph.
Just stripping it all away.
Exactly. He tells them there is no magical Buddha field, no invisible protective spiritual